Hello, thank you all for joining me. I wanted to give you an update on some of the things that have been happening. I think a lot of people have already seen the news today that the Supreme Court made a ruling in the birthright citizenship case. It was unfortunately not unexpected, but still disappointing. They basically said that the Constitution requires a birthright citizenship, even for tourists and people that come into the country illegally. That was not the intention of the drafters of that amendment back in the 1860s. We were actually in the Villages today doing an Abraham Lincoln statue, and he rose to prominence railing against the Dred Scott decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in the 1850s. And the 14th Amendment was really meant to overturn Dred Scott and ensure that blacks were considered citizens of the United States. That has kind of just been manipulated over the years. Once you actually do a historical understanding, I think the justices like Thomas and Alito were correct. But it was a really bad ruling in the sense that it wasn't even just saying the president can't do it through executive order, you have to do it through Congress. That would not have been ideal, but at least you have a pathway. What 5 justices, Roberts, Barrett, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson said was, this is what the Constitution requires. You can't legislate around it. So functionally, what it means is you'd have to change the Constitution, which is difficult to do, or have the court overrule it if you have new members in the future. And I don't think it's the decision is not going to be one that is going to wear well, I think, because China sends people over here to give birth and then they go back. So what? You have a U.S. citizen kid who's been in the country for 2 weeks his whole life, and yet he's entitled to a U.S. passport, can vote in American elections, could even be elected president of the United States. It really makes no sense, and that was not the intention of that. But, it was interesting because we were doing the Lincoln thing today. Lincoln's response to Dred Scott was, okay, you can decide a case between 2 parties, and we respect that, but we don't accept that the Supreme Court should be able to fix the policy for the entire country. President has a responsibility to interpret the Constitution. The legislative branch has an authority to do that. That's how I've always viewed my role as the executive here in Florida. If they put a bill on my desk that I think is unconstitutional, I view myself as being duty bound to veto it. So I think this is the beginning of the fight. It's definitely not a good ruling, but there's going to be other shoes to drop here. There's just no way that this is something that's tenable over the long term. The other thing that we did this week was sign the budget for the state of Florida, including my line item veto. So we're the only state in the country, I think, that can say this, but this is the 4th budget in a row where we've reduced spending. I think a lot of other places have continued to increase spending dramatically. Obviously, the federal government has done that for many, many decades. Our budget 4 years ago was higher than it is today. And we've had population growth and a lot of inflation over that period of time. And yet we're still managing to do it. Part of it is line item veto authority that I have to take out spending that is passed by the legislature. But part of it, quite frankly, is we've just governed very conservatively in the state of Florida. So you have 4 straight years of reduced spending. We have the smallest number of state government bureaucrats per capita in the entire country by far. And we actually have fewer state bureaucrats today than the day I took office. Even though we've had millions of people come into the state, our government is smaller, not just per capita, but even in absolute terms. And then if you look, we've made an effort to accelerate repayment of our state debt. We had, in 7.5 years, we now have knocked out more than 52% of the taxpayer-supported debt has been paid off just in our tenure as governor here, which is, I think, something that's really, really positive. So, and then our rainy day fund has more than tripled since I become governor. We've got a lot of extra money on top of that in our reserves. So the state, I don't think, is in AAA credit rating. I don't think it's ever been in better shape. I think that clearly, if you look at 19 compared to now, on virtually every metric, we're doing better, and in many cases, much, much better. And that's really the name of the game. Are you making things happen? Are you doing it? But I was glad to see that we were able to get 4 straight years of reduced spending. That's going to put us in a great spot going forward to be able to handle whatever comes down the pike. We also did recently the redistricting. And this was something that I had called for a long time ago. If you remember, a couple years ago, I got in a fight with the legislature. I actually vetoed their map in 2022. We got a better map because there was this racially gerrymandered district in North Florida, and it was not required even under the interpretation of the Voting Rights Act then to do it. So we fought, we won on that, and ended up being a much better map. Fast forward now, it was clear that the U.S. Supreme Court was going to potentially say you can't use race in redistricting, which would impact Florida because Florida's state constitution says you have to use race in certain circumstances. And sure enough, in South Florida, there was a really obnoxiously drawn, racially gerrymandered district. And so I said at the beginning of the calendar year, Supreme Court's going to rule on this. We got to do a special session. We know our map's going to be in trouble. We've also had a lot of population growth in Florida, so we want to make sure that we're keeping up and that these districts are apportioned properly. So we called the special session, not knowing for sure when the court was going to rule, and we got rid of that racially. I didn't draw it; other people drew it, but they drew the map to get rid of that racially gerrymandered district in South Florida. And the media, and then when we were in the special session, the Calais decision had not come down yet. Media's like, oh, you said this was going to have all this stuff. Literally, when the Senate was debating this, the Calais decision came down that basically validated what we're going to do. But, it's interesting. We got rid of this racially gerrymandered district that was contorted. But the two districts that resulted from that are compact districts. And they have a plurality of Black voters in those districts. And so you have one that has an incumbent, then you had another that didn't have an incumbent. And so the Democrats and the left were trying to say, oh, you're taking away Black voting power. First of all, it's about individuals. It's not about groups. But they were saying you're taking away this Black voting power. So then you have these two districts, which honestly would probably still be set up good for somebody, who wanted to run and coalesce Black voters behind him. But in some of the other changes in the districts, the fact is some of those areas got a lot more Republicans since I've been governor. And so those districts have changed. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has a district that has been changed. And so rather than run in that district, which would be tougher for her, she is going into this plurality Black district. And she's causing huge amount of problems in the Democrat Party. And a lot of these Black Democrats are understandably saying, hey, wait a minute. You were just saying that the map was bad for taking away this voting power. Now you're trying to butt in to this district. So I think she's showing a lot of chutzpah to want to do that. I don't know how that's going to work out in the primary, but it very well may be the case that in that district, Democrat primary voters defeat Debbie Wasserman Schultz in August. But the reality was we did this, like everything we've done for 7F, we do something, they whine, they cry, they say all this, they sue us. I get out of bed in the morning, I get sued. Somewhere, somebody is suing us all the time. So we get sued on the map, we win in the trial court, we win on the appellate court, and then the Florida Supreme Court also validated. So that map is in place for this election cycle, and it will be the map in November, and it's going to be the map for 2028 and 30, as well, until Florida does redistricting the next time. But people said, oh, it can't be done. You can't do it. We had a plan. We executed it. And then that's in. So I was glad to see that. The other big thing that we've been pushing for the last probably year is the property tax. The reality is the amount of, we don't get property tax revenue at the state level. I've got surplus. I wouldn't need it anyways, and I don't want it, but it goes to local government. And in 2019, those local governments were taking in $32 billion. Today, they're taking in $60 billion. 7.5 years, almost doubling the amount of money they're taking from people in property tax. Now, part of that is because You've had growth in Florida. You've had increase in property values. You have had some that have raised millage rates, but even when they don't raise millage rates, if they're raising the valuation, that hits taxpayers really, really hard. And so people are looking around and they're saying, well, groceries have gone up, all these other things. I know we've had gas recently, and hopefully that's going to come back down. But since 2020, 2021 or so, this country has experienced high inflation, and that's tough and that's brutal. So how do you help folks be able to do and make do? And to me, the property tax was the easiest thing, because people kept talking about property tax. It's something that would need to go on the ballot, but it's something that you can do big relief for the homestead. And my view was, if it's your homestead, it shouldn't be subject to tax. Now, that would be some tax that the locals couldn't get, but they're still taxing all the other non-homestead residences, and they're taxing the commercial, which is still an awful lot of money. And it's a lot more money than they had in 2019. And I remember everything seemed to work fine then. So we had a good proposal. It was very well thought out in the sense of homestead property tax free. We started at $250, and then you raise the threshold in the succeeding years. But, if you get to $500,000 exemption, that's 92% of Florida homeowners, homesteaded residents, would be totally off the tax roll. As you go up from there, you start adding more and more, and it would have ended up being about 30% of all the revenue for local government when finally phased in. But that's still a lot more than what they were getting, even adjusted for inflation in 2019. So it was doable. We put that out. We also said, since we have a big surplus, I'll create a fund at the state level and I'll give grants. You tell me some police department is going to have to lay off a cop or two and that are necessary, I'll send you a grant for $300,000. You say that there's an issue with a school district, I'll send you a grant for $20 million or whatever the number would be to be able to do. I would be willing to do that, and we could do that. But I'm not going to be backfilling DEI programs or some of the nonsense that we've seen with some of the local governments throughout the years. And so it was something that voters really liked when they read it. But I was in a situation where I had to work with the Florida Senate on this. I wasn't able to deal with the Florida House because of the posture that they took with particularly the Speaker and some of the henchmen about just trying to stop us in our administration from getting things done like we had so successfully. And they had different motivations for doing that. Obviously, it wasn't successful, and they don't really have much to show for that. But that's just what it was. So we had to work with the Senate on it. And the plan was just get it to the Senate and then make the House kind of vote that in. And, what happened was there was just a rebellion in the House about doing the homestead property tax elimination. And so they ended up doing something that was watered down. It's still a property tax cut. I'm in favor of it and I'll vote for it. But it isn't going to ever get your homestead to be tax free, not next year, not 5 years, not 10 years from now. And so while it's a reduction, I think it will be meaningful for a lot of people. It was not transformational the way that we had hoped that it would be. Nevertheless, it's going to be on the ballot in November. That's the best opportunity people are going to have to be able to vote themselves relief. But I kind of feel like it's a situation, if you watch the movie Back to the Future, you have Marty McFly. He's at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance toward the end of the movie, and he starts playing Johnny Be Good with the band, and he's going, and then the high school kids are there, and they're like dancing, they're having this great time. Well, then all of a sudden he kind of turns that into like an 80s hair metal riff, and he's like doing all this stuff. He's like laying on the floor, kicking over the speakers, which was commonplace in like the mid 1980s. Well, then he stops, and everyone in the dance is just looking at him like, what the hell is going on? And so Marty goes up to the mic and he said, well, that may be a little bit too much for you, but your kids are going to love it. And I kind of feel like that's the way with property tax. The idea, some people just can't conceive of the idea that you actually could have your homesteaded property not be subject to tax. And I just view it as a constitutional protection for your property right. At what point does the government get its mitts off your property? all you're doing is sitting there using your property. You got to keep forking over money. And people say, oh, well, you're doing services, all this other stuff. Well, first of all, that's not even true. If you get a house and you're paying $4,000 a year, then you buy a new house and they give you a different tax basis and you got to pay $9,000 a year. Are you using twice as much services as you? Of course you didn't. Of course not. You're somebody that's elderly and your kids are old. Are you using school district? No. So the idea that you're paying for service is just not true. So it was something that I think we have the ability to do it in Florida because we have so much revenue coming in from non-residents, from visitors, tourists, snowbirds, some of these very wealthy people from like South America that have like big homes and Miami and some of this stuff. So we have an opportunity to do it. I think that what the legislature put on, it's kind of an opening salvo, but there's going to be more work that's going to need to be done on the tail end of that if you really want to get to where your homestead is tax-free. But don't let anyone tell you that somehow government is not going to be able to function. We've reduced spending 4 years in a row in our budgets. Yet we're still standing. We're doing fine. We could be spending another $20 billion based on inflation and all this other stuff. And that's just not the way we've chosen to do things in Florida. And it just shows it can be done. I do want to take some questions, but before I do that, I had a lot of people over the years. So we published a book in 2023, The Courage to Be Free. New York Times actually had to put it number one on the bestseller list 2 weeks in a row. And I know they did not want to do that. So that shows you that the book did well. But prior to that, before I was ever in elected office, we did a book 15 years ago, Dreams from Our Founding Fathers. And it was a play off of Obama's book. And basically what the book was an indictment about what Obama was doing, his leftism, and then it was contrasting that with the vision of the Founding Fathers, the founding documents, the Federalist Papers, these early debates where they really had to think very critically about what kind of society were they trying to create, where do our rights come from, all these different really, really serious issues. And so we did that. It was not like nobody knew who I was. And so we sold books, but it wasn't like I could go on TV and sell 100,000 books. It was like sell 20 here, 30 there. Well, eventually they ran out. And over the years, people purchased them. People were like, I can't find your book. How do I find it? Some of them went on eBay for like $1,500 at one point. And I'm just like, okay. So they're like, well, you should really put it out in anticipation for America 250. But what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to have to like mass produce a book, mass market it, go around having to do all this, or I'm trying to sell, 250,000, 300 books with all that stuff. And so what we decided to do, and so the original book was this one. So Dreams from Our Founding Fathers, First Principles in the Age of Obama. And honestly, it reads very well today in the sense of what I was hitting Obama on, we were right. And basically, this is part of the start of this real militant leftism that we see in all these different blue areas in particular. And you saw it here in the roots of Obama. So this was the book, that we did. A lot of people wanted to get it. Some people paid a lot of money for it. But I didn't want to just reproduce that. So what we did was we do have an updated version of it right here for America 250. I think you see anniversary edition. But we're only doing 1,776 copies. And I'm signing and numbering each one of them individually. And so it's going to be more expensive than a typical book off the rack as a result of that, because I'm having to put a lot of time into doing it. But I know a lot of people wanted it just for like a collector's item. So I've written a new introduction for this book that kind of surveys where we are on the eve of America 250, talks about some of the themes in the book, and then just makes a few observations about kind of where you go from here. So all of these, any one of these will have signature, and then I'm numbering each one from 1 to 1776. So you will have that. So if you're interested in doing this, you can go to the website is DeSantis1776.com. And again, there's very little number of them. We just wanted to do something for some of our supporters who've been asking me over the years. Obviously there's a cost associated, so we're trying to make it worthwhile with that as well. But I do think it'll be more of a collector's item. I think it's still the new introduction's a good read. And the rest of the stuff, I mean, some of it is kind of quaint in terms of the stuff I'm complaining about Obama doing. That's not even scratching the surface of some of these new bozos we see, like in New York City and all this other stuff. But nevertheless, I think the issues that we're highlighting have been perennial issues. And so as we're coming on the America 250 celebration this weekend, we wanted to offer that to folks to be able to do that. And then hopefully be able to think about why America 250 is a special time to celebrate. We are not a normal country. We had founding fathers who risked an awful lot, who had an awful lot to lose by putting this stake in the ground and saying, these rights come from God, not from government. Government's purpose is to secure our rights, but we don't get our rights from the government. And we need a rule of law, and we need a constitution, and all the things that they did to lay the building blocks of having what's become, in spite of all the issues we see and that we deal with all the time around the country. We've got a lot of issues as a country. We have issues everywhere, but still the most successful country in the history of the world. And the question is are we going to be able to do that beyond this 250 in a way that's really going to be strong for future generations? And I think it all goes back to Benjamin Franklin. They win the revolution. The next decade, they do a constitution. He's asked, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? And his answer was a republic if you can keep it. He understood you could have the best declaration and constitution in the world. It's not running on autopilot. It does require each generation of Americans to step up, to defend freedom when it's at risk. And I think what we've tried to do in Florida is, where's the threat to freedom? And to me, the biggest threat is the militant left. And so our view is we can't just say, we're just going to stop the left from further advances, because the left has already won a lot of victories. And so my view is, I'm going to stop them, but I also need to roll back what they've done, the hold on the institutions, what we've done to reform higher ed, K through 12 education, the big fights with some of the woke corporations that we had over the years, and really fighting those fights across the board to make sure that the left is not governing us without our consent. And I think Florida, of any state, the founding fathers could look like who's carrying that torch with the spirit of 1776. I think that they would say it's us here in the free state of Florida. So I'm looking forward to doing the celebrations this weekend. I'm going to be on Friday night. I'm planning to be on with Sean Hannity up at Mount Rushmore. We're going to go up and participate in their special on that. But this is an important time to be appreciative, but also to reflect on why our country was founded the way it was, and what do we need to do going forward to ensure. And I can tell you, the founders' insights, they had horse and buggy. They didn't have self-driving cars. They didn't have internet. They didn't have a lot of the things that we have. But the insights they had are just as valid today as they were then. Human nature has not changed one bit since 1787. And so the key is really to take those insights and apply those to new issues that we have before us. And that's what we've tried to do in the free state of Florida. Okay, we're going to do some questions, and I'll try to get through as many as I can. And I appreciate you guys joining me, and hopefully you found this update to be informative.
All right, so if you need to ask a question, you want to ask a question to Governor DeSantis, hit *3 and you'll be connected with someone to ask a question. Governor, we're already over 1,000 questions on this call, and the books are also flying off the shelf. Again, go to DeSantis 1776 to pick up your copy. The first question is from Catherine in Miami. You recently signed Florida's state budget with some major decisions and vetoes. Looking ahead, what's one thing that the budget you hope people in Florida will remember?
Well, I think we've done a lot of good stuff, and I'm proud of a lot of different things. I mean, I would say the one thing, if you're in South Florida, our Everglades restoration is the biggest restoration in the history of the United States of America. And we took the bull by the horns on that. We've delivered, we've completed pretty much everything that the state is supposed to do. We're now working with the feds for them to complete their share. We did dedicate a lot of resources. I mean, we dedicated, billions and billions of dollars, big increase from what had been done prior to my administration. But I'm proud of it because I think it's an important part of Florida's culture, economy, ecology. But it's also going to be something that future legislatures are going to be in a position where they're going to be able to spend a lot less on this, because I will have put in the infrastructure. We will have done what was needed to be done to restore water flow and to make sure that this massive ecological wonder is being left to God better than we found it. So I'm proud of having done that, because it's such a big enterprise, but it also is now going to generate a lot of savings in the years to come, because people are not going to have to dedicate as much resources as we did, since we did the heavy lifting.
Governor, it's not going to be any surprise. A lot of the questions in here are similar to this. This is from Diana, a longtime supporter of yours. She's asking, can you tell us what's up for the future?
Well, people have asked me that a lot of times, obviously. And, my view on it is, I'm going to run through the tape here in Florida all the way through January of 2027. And I've got more stuff. We've got more irons in the fire. I mean, we're going to have a big announcement tomorrow. We're going to have a bunch of stuff that we're going to be doing over these next months. If the property tax passes, even though it wasn't my proposal, we'll have to work with the legislature in November and December and implement that. And we're going to be doing that in a way that's very friendly for taxpayers. So there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pike in that regard. And I think it's almost like, look, we'll have a 8-year record that I think is second to none in terms of conservative success, policy victories, leadership, disaster management, crisis response, all the things you want in a leader. I think we did very, very strongly. And that's something that we'll be proud of. And we're leaving Florida in a very, very good spot. But I'm not done yet, and I want to continue to run through the tape. So there's going to be a lot more that happens. I know everyone's always, kind of focused on, upcoming elections and this and that and everything. And I get that. But we've got a lot, and we've done a lot just in the last few months that hasn't gotten any real attention. I mean, I signed legislation providing for the decertification of these partisan teacher unions. I mean, conservatives have been complaining about the partisan teacher unions for decades, and yet Florida seems to be the only state that's actually done anything about it. And so that's just kind of par for the course of us. We're getting the job done, and we're going to keep doing it. Just today, or at my request, the University System Board of Governors announced that, when I became governor, they gave in-state tuition to illegal aliens. I had to work hard to get that repealed, and we did with the legislature and got that repealed. So then the next step is, well, wait a minute, why would we be admitting people who are here illegally into our universities and higher ed? And so they said, we're not doing that. It's for Florida residents. We also have some spots for other U.S. citizens. I think foreign should be very limited, but to the extent you have foreign, it should be a lawful foreigner who comes, certainly not somebody who's here in violation of the law. So that's just happened just now. We're the only state in the country that's done that. We're the only state in the country that stopped H-1Bs in the university system. They had been a cottage industry for that, and it's obviously a very fraud-ridden visa program. So you're going to continue to see more like that. We're going to take action tomorrow to implement our bill against Sharia and the terror designations, and on it goes.
All right. Again, if you have a question, please press *3. You'll be connected with an operator who will take in your question. Again, these books are flying. DeSantis1776.com to order your signed and numbered to 1776 book by Governor DeSantis. Governor, one of the questions here is from Margaret. She's asking, the plan to stop voter fraud. Obviously, the SAVE Act has kind of been holed up right now. What have we done in Florida, and what do you think the national landscape looks like as well?
Well, we passed the Florida SAVE Act. I signed that into law. But you remember when I became governor, the 2018 election was a tight election. And so a lot of people didn't think I was going to win. I think the polls had me down. And so we go in and we win. And so my opponent calls me on election night, concedes the race. And, I'm looking, it's like you won by 1%. It's like 80,000 votes out of 8 million cast, which was kind of standard for Florida, right? So I do that. And then we had a U.S. Senate race, which was a 50,000 margin. And then we had an Agriculture Commission race, which is a 40,000 margin. And so it looked like we had the sweep in the statewide races. And that was when there were more Democrats than Republicans in Florida. So I give the victory speech. I go home and I'm doing this, going about my business. And then like a day or two later, I get a call from one of the people in the campaign. Oh, Governor, there's more votes coming in Broward and Palm Beach and you're losing votes. And I'm like, really? Like, yeah, you were at 80,000. Now you're down to 70,000, probably going to end up in the 60s. And I'm like, well, where do these votes come from? Oh, it's Broward, it's Palm Beach or whatever. And they're like, look, you're going to win. They're probably going to try to take some off, but you'll win. But we were worried about the Agriculture Commission race and the Senate race. So by the time all these votes days later are processed, I'm still winning, but I'm winning by half the amount. The Senate race went into a hand recount. It was like a 10,000 vote margin. And the Ag Commissioner race flipped to the Democrat. And so I was like, what is going on here? So I got in and we removed the Palm Beach and Broward supervisors of elections. We banned ballot harvesting. We had voter ID. We created an election fraud unit in state government that can bring prosecutions against people for illegally voting. And you've had people, illegal aliens, people that have voted in 2 jurisdictions. We've had a lot of people that have been held accountable. And I think as a result of having accountability, I think you've had a huge reduction in any chicanery in Florida, because part of the reason people do it is because nobody ever holds anyone accountable. In Florida, they know they're going to get held accountable. And so you do it. Now, the SAVE Act federally, they don't seem like they want to pass anything. I'm not sure if they're going to get anything done, to be honest with you. I mean, they haven't gotten a lot done overall in the Congress, to be quite frank. So I don't know. There was a recent Supreme Court decision yesterday where the question was, does it violate the federal Constitution, which prescribes elections? An election day is written in the Constitution for federal elections. If you have a ballot that comes in 4 days later, can that still be counted? And the court divided on that and basically said, well, as long as it's postmarked by election day, it could still count after. Now, mind you, that is not how we do it in Florida. In Florida, the ballots have to be in by election day. And the only exceptions to that are federal mandates on overseas military active duty. And I remember being in Iraq and voting overseas, and for whatever reason, it takes a long time. But on core votes, the election, you have an election, and at 7:00, the election's over. And you shouldn't have votes pouring in 2, 3, 4, 5 days later. So I think it was a bad decision, but Congress ultimately is able to remedy that if they want to. I just don't see that they're really serious about remedying it.
Okay. Governor, Dana is asking, in the spirit of the 250th anniversary, what tips do you have to bring us back to a time when everyone worked together against something like tyranny?
Well, look, I think that, part of, as people have asked me about different things about our administration, and, when it seemed like once the calendar turned to 26, I started getting people saying, oh, we don't want to lose you. Oh, we want you to stay. Oh, this. And it was almost like, guys, I'm still here. I still got another year. But I started to get a lot of kind of people asking about, what's next, but also what are you proud of and all this other stuff and some of the things. But I think probably to this day, the thing I get the most of is, thank God you stood up for us during COVID. It was very dark days. The narrative was totally against us. You had people like Fauci attacking us. People's livelihoods were at stake. Their businesses were at stake. Kids' education were at stake. Just people's well-being to live a normal life was at stake. And I took a lot of flack for those decisions, which were not necessarily even popular at the time. Now everyone says they were for me, but at the time it wasn't the case. And I was cutting against the grain. And part of, I think, the reason why I did that is because, I studied the founders. I studied a lot of the sources that they relied on. Their conception of leadership was just different than what like the media nowadays would herald as like a good leader. The media heralds a lot of superficialities more so than actual substantive leadership qualities. But I think their view was always, why are you in this? They were in it to found a republic and to maintain a republic. Washington could have been king. He could have given himself riches. He could have been on a throne. But I think because of his influences, it wasn't that he wasn't ambitious, but his ambition was to really be remembered in history as somebody who refused power and refused to take the throne and helped establish a republic. He knew that would be more significant than just to be a run-of-the-mill autocrat that takes power for themselves. And they had certain conceptions of what I think they could have considered civic virtue. And so for me, I've never looked at polls. I don't really care, if I'm getting hit. It just is what it is. It goes with the territory. But it's like some issues matter, and then some issues really matter. And there aren't very many issues that had more broader effect than with COVID and how you're responding to that. And so by taking positions that were good for people, their livelihoods, their freedom and all that, even though I was getting hit, that was an easy decision in the sense of I wasn't going to sit there and try to do the wrong thing for the wrong reasons just to try to save myself politically. I was willing to sacrifice politically and even lose re-election if it meant standing up for people in their time of need. And so we did that. And ultimately, that worked out. But I think if you study the founders, study their insights on rights coming from God, the proper role of government, all these other things, for sure. But if you look at how they conceived of leadership and kind of the classical virtues that they believed in, those are as relevant today as they've ever been. And that's part of the reason we've done a lot in Florida to really trumpet classical education, because I think that's really the building blocks of Western civilization. Those are things that if that's your foundation, all these other issues, I think, become a lot easier to solve. And I think part of the divisiveness in modern America is, quite frankly, you have a lot of these people going to these universities. And look, I went to Yale and Harvard Law School. I know the zeitgeist there. I think it's gotten a lot worse. But, they're basically being told to reject the founding fathers, to be able to reject Western civilization, to indulge in faddish ideology. And so you don't necessarily have that common set of principles that you can rely on. And maybe you apply them differently than me. Maybe, your view on economic policy is a little bit different, but we all kind of have the common currency of a few foundational truths. And we've lost that in many respects as a country. And I think the education system is partially to blame for it. I think the media is partially to blame, but also social media and being able to only get certain viewpoints in your feed or this or that. And it's almost like you can live your whole life now in an intellectual cocoon. And that probably wasn't true, in the past. I mean, you go back to Kennedy and Nixon. If you watch those debates, it's not clear who the conservative and who the liberal is on some of these issues. I mean, they were basically, arguing about what they thought was better for the country. But I don't think you could say one was, rejecting the founders or anything like that. I mean, it was a much different time. But we had a more unified culture. People had the same sources of media, which for good or for worse. I mean, because some of that media was biased. And so it's good that there's options. But I think everything's so fragmented that I think it's really frayed the idea that we have a common culture.
All right. Again, hit *3 to ask questions. We have time for just about 2 or 3 more questions here with Governor Ron DeSantis. Hit *3 for that. Hundreds of books are flying off the shelf. We're running out of books here. So if you want to get your signed and numbered to 1776 book, go to DeSantis1776.com. There were 2 questions from Cooper and from Sophia asking about internships with the governor. Email peter@rondesantis.com. Send your resume over. We'll take a look and we'll reach out to you. Governor, there's another question from Wynn. saying, in my opinion, you're the greatest governor ever, not just in Florida, but nationwide. You've accomplished so much. Is there anything else you wanted to get done, but there's just not enough time?
Well, look, I think the one good thing I can say is whatever I promised, I delivered. I didn't promise anything that I didn't deliver. And part of the reason is because I didn't make any promises if I didn't think I could deliver it. I mean, for me, it's like, hey, here's the roadmap. Here's why you should elect me first time and second time. And then here's what I'm going to do. And you can set your clock to that's what I'm going to do. Now, we delivered on those, but we way over delivered. I mean, as new issues came down the pike, we led the country on so many different issues, for sure. And I think that that's something that's been meaningful. So I think we accomplished everything I said I would do. I accomplished a lot of things I never promised to do, but still ended up doing. So the question is kind of going forward. Look, I mentioned on the property tax, I think this is an opening salvo if it passes. I don't think that this can be the end of it. I think you need to get to kind of my vision. I think my vision on that was the vision I was hearing from voters about wanting to have a homestead that's tax-free. And we can get there in Florida. It may not happen overnight, but it can be done. And so hopefully there'll be support for that going forward, but it is going to require additional action, even if this amendment does pass. And then a lot of the other stuff that we did, we really changed a lot about things like higher education. But, you go to like Sarasota and New College. I mean, that was a small little hippie compound. We put it and did a conservative takeover. And now it's a conservative, classical, liberal arts. There's been a lot of great stuff. The media always attacks it, which I always tell the president of the university, Corcoran, is a friend of mine. I say, I know you're doing a good job when they're attacking you, because if you weren't doing a good job, they'd ignore you. And so they know that this represents a different way to do things. The enrollment's up, the test scores are going back up. So there's a lot of things, but that's a small thing. Some of these others are a lot bigger. It's a little bit more difficult. And so we did things like, now we changed the law. All tenured professors now have to undergo review and can be terminated for poor performance. So you have somebody whose scholarship is scant, but their activism is high. Well, you know what? If you want to be an activist, go to Berkeley, go some of these places. I don't care, but we're not paying for you to do that in Florida. Well, now they can be processed out. And they've processed out many, hundreds of professors who just have a different conception of what higher education should be than the policy of the state of Florida. We've created these classical institutes at Florida State, at University of Florida, the Adam Smith Center at Florida International University, Hamilton Center at Florida. We've had people, the faculty that we've built up, because we can hire direct there without a faculty veto. We've been able to build faculty there that if we didn't do the reforms I did, it would have taken 75 years to build the faculty the way we have. We've done it in 3 or 4 years, where you've got people from Oxford and Chicago and Princeton and Harvard who don't want the woke, don't want the politicization, believe in the classical mission of education. Yeah, a lot of them are personally conservative, but it's even more than that. It's about, what's the philosophy when you're going into the classroom. So those are things that are going to have to keep going in the future. And I think if you take your eye off the ball, then the reform will probably be more muted. If you accelerate and continue, then we're going to continue to be the envy of the nation. And so I'm definitely happy we did what we accomplished, what we set out to accomplish. There's not a single thing where I can say, just think about things I don't even talk about. We have 7 people on the Supreme Court in this state. When I got elected, we had one of the most liberal courts in the country. Now we have 6 of the 7 justices were appointed by me. I don't think I'm going to get the 7th, because I think he's a liberal and doesn't want me to have the satisfaction of appointing him. We have filling a seat. That's fine. 6 of 7 isn't bad. And I think that the oldest one of that is maybe mid-50s. So you can serve till you're 75. So those 6, unless they get other judgeships, they could be on the court for another 20 years. I've got some on the court who will be on that court for 30 years. And so those are really significant achievements that will carry on into the future. We did the universal school choice, first state in the country to do that. Helps a lot of parents, and they're able to access all forms of education, which has been a really, really good thing. I mentioned Everglades. I mentioned support for law enforcement, some of the things that we did throughout that tenure. But the one thing I'll say that we did, I think that has separated us from some of the other Republican states, because look, there's some other red states that are doing well too. I think Florida's doing the best, but we have fought against entrenched interests when we've had to. We weren't just kind of, whatever this corporation says we're going to do. I mean, I came into office having battled the sugar industry on Everglades restoration. They spent a lot of money against me when I was running in 2018, and we won. We took on big pharma in a variety of ways, the Canadian sales, no vax mandates, all this, and we won those fights. We, of course, went toe-to-toe with Disney, the most powerful company in the state of Florida. We won that fight. That wasn't easy, and we got a lot of scars as a result of having done that tussle. We've taken on big tech, first on the data center issue, where we said, they claim they don't want to put costs on other people for data centers, but they pledge to not put costs. When you actually legislate that, they don't like it. So we legislated protections for our ratepayers. I signed that in the law. And that was something we were working on, a lot of other things in that regard too, which is important. So being able to stand up, even when you have really compelling interest. I mean, we have our biggest utility, FPL. Their number one priority was this rooftop solar bill a couple years ago. I vetoed it. And you know what? We work very well with them on hurricanes, and it's obviously a successful company, and they're very powerful in Florida. But ultimately, I got to look out for the folks. And so having somebody in governor who's willing to take those stands and make sure that you're not getting lost in the forest for the trees. Yeah, there's going to be people that lobby on that. That's fine. That's part of the process. You're going to have to be willing to take decisions that are going to cut against the grain of sometimes some very powerful interests. We've done that. And I think what it shows is when you do it, you end up having more trust from the voters because they see that you're actually fighting for them on some of these issues. I think I can do a couple more.
Yep. I think we have time for one more if that's okay. Sebastian, and we'll kind of put these two together since you said a couple more. Sebastian and Nathan. Sebastian said, what motivated you to enter public office? And Nathan wants to know what's the best advice you can give to a young Floridian who wants to be in a position maybe like you one day.
Well, so my first foray was running for Congress in 2012, which I did successfully. And people ask me, why did you do it? And I tell them I had a momentary lapse in judgment, because the reality was I had a lot of idealism about a lot of the ideas, quite frankly, reflected in this book. And I think if you do the book, in the introduction, the original introduction, I kind of talk about military service, support and defend the Constitution, all these things, and how that was really fraying. And obviously it's frayed a lot over the years, but that was something I was doing. So you'll see some of that in this book with that. And so, we had a lot of, I think, idealism about, man, maybe we can really get this Leviathan under control. Maybe we can actually tame this federal government. And Obama got elected the same year I did, reelected the same year I got elected. So I had 4 years with him, which was tough. I had 2 years under Trump, which was a lot better. But I mean, the Congress could have been so much more aggressive. I mean, Trump would have signed anything conservative we put on his desk, and they just weren't as aggressive. So I'm just like, listen. And then, like, my wife and I had started to have kids, and so I'm like, if I'm gonna be away from my kids and my wife for 3 or 4 nights a week, during Congress's session, for what? And so I was like, you know what? I feel like I have the right leadership. I feel like I have the right ideas. But in the Congress, as a junior member without term limits, I don't want to be there for 25 years just to be able to make a big impact. And so part of the reason for me running for governor was like, listen, I'll be able to lead. I'll be able to set the agenda. I'll be able to get all this stuff done. And I'm not going to have to worry about a committee. I'm not going to have to worry about these things. You get in, you do it. And so I probably accomplished. So I was a very hardworking congressman. We did a lot. I was well read on all the issues. I would actually read the bills. And yet I get into governor, and within like 2 or 3 weeks, I accomplished more in 2 or 3 weeks than I had in the previous 6 years, and more than just about any congressman had accomplished in the previous 6 years as well. And so it's just, some people are more cut out to be executives and to lead and to deliver. Some people like being in Congress, where you're kind of just a face in the crowd. The buck doesn't stop with you. If you don't want to take a tough vote, maybe you take a walk or this or that, and there's all these other things. You know, as governor, these bills on my desk, like I got to veto it and explain why, or I sign it and defend it. Like, that's just a reality. I can't just hide in the corner. And so it's just a different type of leadership. But I would say that's more appealing to me, but it's also just something I'm more cut out for and more suited for. And some of it is just getting ahead of issues. And part of it is, I don't poll about issues. So when I did property tax, I didn't know, people were talking to me about it. And they're like, why are you doing property tax? And I'm like, look, it's not about me. I'm in public housing in the governor's mansion. I'm not paying property tax. That's one of the perks of the job. I haven't had to pay it. But I know a lot of people are getting hit by it. And so I'm listening to what they're telling me. And we're going to try to move forward and do something. Now, as we develop the proposal, we tested it to make sure that when people read it, they thought it was good, and they did, and it scored very highly. But in terms of my decision to get involved in property tax and help people with that, not based on a poll at all. None of that stuff was based on a poll. So, but I do think it's about accomplishing things. Calvin Coolidge, who we did a statue for him at Bach Tower Garden, because he actually dedicated that in 1929, his final trip as president. So he was in Florida, he was doing it. He said that, you can't successfully run the government by substituting entertainment for accomplishment. That there's just a certain part of fluff that's involved with politics. And maybe that's something that is always going to be the case. And maybe it's not even in a vacuum a bad thing. But when the results don't matter, when people get into it without trying to produce results, well, that's a big problem. And I think what we've done is we've always been focused on results. I can't tell you how many times we'll do something, we'll get sued or this or that. And it's like, oh, he's going to do. And then, we end up landing the plane because you think through these things, but it's all about how do you ultimately end up landing it? And we've been doing that in a variety of different ways. And so, my advice for people would be, it's like, what if I want to get into politics or whatever? I would not necessarily just get into politics as a staff. I mean, if you want to be an elected official, I don't know that you want to go into a staff or do something, maybe as an intern or something when you're younger. But I would say get some life experience. For me, it was the military. What was that? I was very young when I ran. I was in my early 30s, and I was the youngest governor in America up until even a year or two ago. And here I am finishing my second term. I'm younger than probably 95% of the governors right now, and I'm in the last year of my second term. So that's just the way it kind of happened for me. But I don't think if I had not done military, if I had just tried to do only politics, it would have been as good. I know a lot of people will go and get business experience. I think that's a good thing. And then just areas where you're having to exercise leadership, I think that is more important than necessarily being involved in politics all the time. I mean, you can be involved more on the periphery and still do those other things. And it's also the case if you want to be an elected official, it's like when I was doing the first book, so I would go, I wanted to just do this as a side thing where I was be involved in business and other things when I got out of the military. And we do this. And I thought, maybe I would get something regular. We didn't really have podcasts and stuff then. But it was just something that I thought maybe could be something, I have all this constitutional knowledge and history knowledge, and maybe I can apply that. And it was honestly, it was kind of dumb of me to think that, because that's not really how the world works. But nevertheless, that's just what I thought. But I'm going around, I'm speaking at these groups. That was the Tea Party era. Speaking to these tea parties, I'm speaking to some of these groups. And a lot of these people are older, young man, you need to run. And I'm like, run for what? I was like, to just run to run, that was not something that I wanted to do. And so when the opportunity did Congress, I'm like, you know what? I got to go in there, be part of the solution, and we got to do all this. And so I kind of had a rationale for running. I had a rationale for doing the governor. Of course I did with that. But I think a lot of people run wanting to more just be somebody rather than do something. So I had a lot of things that I wanted to do. Now, you said, what would I have done in governor that I wish I could have done? I did what I said. Now, in Congress, there are definitely things I'd like to see. I'd like to see term limits for members of Congress. I'd like to see a balanced budget requirement. I'd like to see all these things that could really, I think, change the incentives. We did not get that done in Congress. Obviously, that's much more difficult when you're one of 435. But I would just say, if you run, know why you're running in terms of what are you going to actually do to help people or to make your community better? What's the results of you having been in office? When you look after 2 years or 4 years or 8 years or however long you're in, what do you want to say you actually accomplished? And if you don't have anything that you can think of, then you may be not running for the right reasons. And so I come across a lot of people in politics, and some of them aren't, it's not even that they're bad people, but like they're just running because it's kind of a title that they want. It's not really running to do that. And then there's others who are more agenda driven and mission driven. I think you look at some of the people I've appointed, like a Blaise Ngoli at CFO, you know, he's active. He's got a philosophy that he's bringing to bear, and it's not just kind of holding the title to hold the title. So know why you want to do it and know how you're going to make a difference. That's really the reason to be able to do. If you just want to be a cog in the machine, honestly, there's a lot more productive things, than you're going to be able to do. And I used to say it involves sacrifice. When I got Congress, first thing I did was sold stocks. I said no trading stocks. So from the day I got sworn into Congress till today, I have not traded a stock. Now we have 401ks and all that, but no individual trade. And part of it was, I didn't want to be in a situation. I was not going to use insider information in Congress to get rich, but I didn't want to be accused of that. I didn't want to have a vote where someone said, oh, you just traded ExxonMobil and you voted this way. So I said no on stock. To this day, we haven't done it. No on the congressional pension, no on the health care subsidy, all this other stuff. And so that's had an impact. Obviously, if I could have done it, I would be better off, especially when you have bull markets. But it used to be the expectation that was the case, that, somewhat of a sacrifice. That's kind of changed because in Congress, this stuff is rampant. You have Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's like a Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger times 10 in terms of what she's doing to beat the market. But then you have a lot of other people, Republicans or Democrats as well. That's just not the way I conceived of it. I don't know I don't even know how much voters even care anymore, to be honest with you. But I care, and I think I did it the right way. I may be a little bit poorer as a result of it, but that's okay. You got to do what you want for the right reason. So I would just say, be cognizant of that. I do think, even though I said I'm not sure how much people care, I do think underlying people do. They want to know you're in it for the right reasons. And if they think you're in it for the right reasons, and they think you're going to fight for them, and you show that you've done that, they will back you. They will come out and vote for you. And I remember when I was running for re-election, I mean, it really wasn't a great Republican year. It was supposed to be a big wave year, and it wasn't. We were really the only ones in Florida that had a wave, and part of it was people were excited to go out and vote for me. They weren't voting against the left. I mean, they were doing that because they knew I was beating the left, but that wasn't the primary. Most of these elections, you go, our candidate may stink, but we hate the Democrats more, so we're going to go out and vote against, For us, it was a positive. People wanted to go out and thank you for what you did. We want to continue the mission, keep Florida free, all this other stuff. And that's when I think that you're doing it for the right reasons. And people see that, and people have that trust, and they will have your back. And people had my back like no other governors ever had. And the Democrats had no chance. We were a swing state in 22 in terms of the registration. It was still very close. I mean, we had like a 0.5% gain on them compared to a 0.5% or 2% behind when I ran in 18. And yet we win by 20 points. That doesn't happen by accident. So I appreciate those questions. So what I will tell you guys going forward, you are going to have this if you're a Florida resident, and I know not everyone's from Florida, if you're a Florida voter, you're going to have the property tax on the ballot this November. Even though it wasn't my proposal, even though I don't think it goes as far as we could have. I'm voting for it enthusiastically. I think it'll be the biggest property tax reduction for homesteaded Floridians in the modern history of the country, certainly since 1980, when they quintupled the homestead exemption with the ballot initiative. So I'm for it. And if it does pass, and I think it probably will, but I just don't know, to be honest, because my proposal we had vetted, we knew was going to pass. But if it does pass, I'll be there on the back end in November and December working with the new legislature to be able to bring this in for a landing and get this implemented in a way that's going to benefit taxpayers. And so for those of you who went to DeSantis1776.com and picked up a copy of the book, thank you for doing that. We're only doing the limited number of copies. And so this probably not going to have a lot of chances to be able to do it. And so if you did get it, thank you. We look forward to getting those out to you as soon as possible. And look, if you're a Florida resident, you should be thankful that you got a very well-run state, the state that's accomplished an awful lot, certainly over my tenure as governor. And if you're not in Florida, I know there's other good states out there, but we've led on more issues than any other state has in the last 7.5 years. And it's been a privilege to be able to do that. I got a lot of arrows in my back from doing that over the years, but that just goes with the territory, and I wouldn't change anything if I could. So thank you all for your support. We'll be back, probably in a few months as we lead into the fall election. We'll do another one of these, and we'll keep you guys posted. So thank you, and God bless, and hope everybody enjoys America 250 and our great 4th of July celebration. As I mentioned, you can look for me Friday night at Mount Rushmore with Hannity on the special that he's doing on the Fox News channel.